Oh my goodness! I'm doing a repeat. Last night on Facebook, excuse me, I did a program remembering the Cock of the Walk. For those of you who have never heard of the Cock of the Walk, the Cock of the Walk was a restaurant that had its origins right here in Natchez, Mississippi. And the Cock of the Walk, I think it wound up franchising in like over a dozen different places. And so I thought I would talk about the old Cock of the Walk a little bit. What a restaurant it was. I played there off and on for quite a number of years, as did two ladies, older ladies. And the Cock of the Walk got started in Natchez, Mississippi, a little shanty building, a little cypress shanty building practically, down by the riverfront in Natchez under the hill. Natchez is different. We have two Natchez. We have the Natchez under the hill, which has some remnants of the old rough and tumble days from back in the 1700s, 1800s, early 19th. Excuse me. Much to New Orleans' consternation, Natchez is older than New Orleans. So anyway, a little building down under the hill where three couples in Natchez came together and started a restaurant. Those couples were the Iricks, the Ballards, and the Colbanks. Now, the Ballards are the ones that had the real estate, so to speak. They owned the land, they owned that building that they were going to use, so they brought that to the table. The Iricks had a wonderful history in the restaurant business in the Natchez area. So they were very, very well versed with the in and outs of running a restaurant. And they brought many of their family recipes to the restaurant itself. So what did the Colbanks bring? Well, the wife's name was Weta. The husband's name was Forrest. But Weta was a force to be reckoned with. Weta was creative. Had a great imagination. Weta was a communicator. Weta could do artwork and sign lettering. And the biggest powerful attribute for Weta was she was well connected with tourism in the state of Mississippi. So by default, Weta was able to really promote and sell her restaurant that she was involved with these two other couples. So let's talk about that restaurant. Like I said, it was in a basically a shotgun building, rough-hewn cypress under the hill. They added on a front porch. They had a side gallery that went around. And when it first began, it was open only to tourists. Of course, tourists, they would come to Natchez. The 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe early 90s were the most active years with it. But tourists would come to town by the busloads, and they were always looking for a good place to eat. And so Weta, the Colbanks, the Ballards, and the Iricks would open the doors to this restaurant to these busloads of tourists to eat. What did they serve? Okay, catfish was not a real popular item at the time. I mean, we Southerners, of course, we've always eaten catfish, but not so much people outside of this area. And that's what they served. Pond raised, grain fed catfish, fried catfish. Their menu at first was incredibly small. Their entree was the fried catfish. It was served along with hush puppies. Now, you do know how the hush puppies got their name. There's two speculations. One of the most popular is that when in the old days when they were be cooking up, having a catfish fry, the dogs would get real rambunctious, wanting some of the catfish. And so what they would do is they would fry up these little globs of cornmeal, kind of like you'd make cornbread out of. And they toss them to the dogs, say, hush, puppy. So that's one of the speculations that how hush puppies got started. But anyway, fried catfish, hush puppies, what were called river fries, basically French fries. That was it as far as the main meal. But you also had a choice they had wonderful onion rings. They had fried dill pickles, which that was an Irish, that came from the Irish clan. Again, fried dill pickles. They had tremendously great coleslaw, cock of the walk coleslaw. And they would also serve it with a pone of cornbread that the waiters would bring out freshly right out of the oven in these little frying pans, these little frying skillets. So that was it. And the tourists loved it. But the locals couldn't get into it as far as being able to get in and eat. It was not developed for the local people, but word got out that food was very good. And it wasn't long after that they decided, you know what, let's hire ourselves a general manager that will be here all the time, and we will start opening it to the general public, and that was it. It took off like gangbusters. So now they always had a pianist that was there. The first pianist was Launa Oliver. She was a retired nurse. Launa originally played piano couple of buildings up the street on Silver Street under the hill. She played piano inside what's called the Under the Hill Saloon. But her mama didn't like the idea of her daughter playing in a saloon. So she said, you can't play there anymore. And Launa wound up going a couple of buildings down to the Cock of the Walk. Now, Launa was in her early 70s. Her little mama was like 93, something like that. But she didn't want her daughter playing in a saloon. So, come on, let's go down here. I'll play you a little bit. The opening piece, 5'2", that was played in the Launa Oliver style. Let me play Launa's signature piece that her father wrote. I'll just play a little excerpt of it. The Sawmill Blues. Sawmill Blues. And Launa had an extensive repertoire. She brought with her, she had a notebook, probably about an inch thick, in which everything was done alphabetically. Under the A's, she would list all the songs that she knew that started with A, and the B's and the C's and everything. It was really incredible. And sometimes she would write down a couple of notes that would kind of click in her mind about how the melody went, but everything else pretty much was inside her head. So she was an incredible pianist. I really enjoyed listening to her. I learned a lot from her. I would go over to her house quite often because she lived right around the block from me. When I first started playing there, I played off and on when I was a junior in high school. And this little old junior would go over to this 73-year-old lady's house, and we'd sit and just play the piano for each other. And she'd drag out all her old music and share it with me. And so that's how I started learning all the old music. But anyway, so people really started flocking into the Cock of the Walk. There are so many stories I could share with you about it. The thing that made the Cock of the Walk so really special, you didn't last long there if you weren't a good waiter. We had such fantastic waiters. It wasn't even funny. It's one of those things you hate to start naming people because you know you're going to leave people out. And a lot of people came and a lot of people left because it was pretty intense. Because, even here in the South, during the peak of summer when it's 102 degrees outside and people would sit out on the porch, hot as blazes, we'd have a waiting list that ran 2 pages. And people would wait sometimes for an hour and a half to get into that little restaurant to eat the fried catfish, hush puppies, and fries with that coleslaw and the cornbread. So it really was awesome days. The waiters, their attire at first was always the same. They had basically a uniform they wore. Black pants. They wore a yellow short sleeve T-shirt that had, you could buy them, Cock of the Walk on the front of it, Cock of the Walk on the back of it. And over that, they wore a long sleeve red shirt where the collar was actually bound with leather, almost like shoelace material. And they would tie that up. And then they wore a hat with a feather in it. A feather? What? Yes. Cock of the Walk. So what the devil was a Cock of the Walk? Well, back in the old riverboat days, and even before then, when these great pioneer men and everything would come down the river in the keel boats. In fact, that was the name of one of the dishes at the Cock of the Walk, was the keel boat special. And that was the fried catfish and everything. But anyway, they would come down in keel boats and skiffs and steamboats, and each boat had a toughest guy on that boat. I mean, the toughest guy. And to signify that, he would stick a turkey feather in his hat. He was known as a Cock of the Walk. And the unwritten rule, and especially in Natchez Under the Hill back in its heyday, was an ugly, sinful, rough tumble. Ears would be bitten off, eyes gouged out, fingers broken, teeth knocked out. I mean, it was a terrible, rough place. But when boats would come in, Natchez Under the Hill, if 2 Cock of the Walks met, that was it. The challenge went down, and those 2 Cock of the Walks, they would battle it out till only one could claim that title from that day and time. So that's where they got the name Cock of the Walk. Every one of the rooms inside the Cock of the Walk was named for somebody. The owners and the manager had gone to like archives and history in the city and looked up prominent names from the past. You had the Mike Fink room. You had the Annie Christmas room. Everything had a purpose and a name for it. And when tour buses would come in during pilgrimage, twice a year, the manager would spend time telling them the names of the rooms and the history behind them. Always very interesting, always very entertaining. Golly, let me tell you something. Those waiters and that management had things worked out to a T. Now remember, this was not a huge restaurant. You went in the main door, you looked straight at that big red piano. You could go to a room to the left. You could go through a doorway to the right of the piano into a larger room that was kind of somewhat subdivided, and then also through another doorway into the final room. My gosh, it didn't seat a tremendous amount of people. But that side room to the right was where they took in these tour buses, and they had it worked so they would start at 5 o'clock. They would take a tour at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. And in 1 hour's time, they could bring in a group of 40 people, get them seated, get them watered and drinks out, bring the food out, the manager take time to speak with them and tell them some of the history of the building and how it got started, get them out the door, have the tables all cleared and bussed, the room swept and cleaned, all in 1 hour's time, ready for the next tour to come through. So these people, I mean, they worked it. I saw it. I watched it. It was incredible how they were able to do it. Not only did we have Laona Oliver, but another pianist came on, Faye Booker. And Faye Booker, Laona Oliver, whereas she had everything in a book and pretty much in her mind, Faye Booker would show up. She would show up with stacks. I mean, it was like 3 times this thick. And she had a carry bag, and she always brought it and took it back with her each night. And everything was in the same order every single night. And that's how she would play it. Piece number 1 from wherever she left off the night before. And off she went till she rotated through the music. Oh my gosh, yes. Cock of the Walk. Still have it after all these years. This is a small crock that coleslaw would be served like for only 2 people. And it would have a wooden spoon sticking up out of it. The silverware looked like something that would be at San Quentin. It was so beat up, and that's what they would do. They would get in a new shipment of 10 plates and 10 water pitchers and things like that. And it was the part of the waiter's job to spend some time back in the kitchen with a new shipment, beating it up, putting dents and things in it. And of course, for the pianist, we had this tin cup with the thing, and we would always bait it with $1 sticking out of it. So, give you a little bit more music from Under the Hill, okay? Mississippi Mud.